There is a silence that dwells beneath the golden sands of Egypt. A silence not born of emptiness, but of secrets buried too deep for time to uncover on its own. The story of Cleopatra, Egypt's last pharaoh, is one woven into the fabric of world history with threads of power, passion, and political drama. And yet, one of the greatest mysteries remains. Where is she? Cleopatra VII Philopator, queen of the Ptolemaic dynasty, has left behind legends carved into stone, papyrus, and the hearts of historians. Her beauty and intellect have echoed through ages, immortalized by Roman poets, Renaissance painters, and Hollywood directors. But while her image remains vivid in our collective imagination, her final resting place remains unknown, hidden somewhere in the folds of ancient time. The tomb of Cleopatra is not just a puzzle for archaeologists. It is a siren's call, a whispering enigma pulling at the minds of explorers, scholars, and dreamers. Because to find her tomb is to unearth a forgotten ending to one of the most extraordinary stories ever lived. It is to finally learn how Egypt's last queen chose to face death after losing everything she ruled. The known facts are few but compelling. After the fall of Alexandria in 30 BCE, Cleopatra is believed to have died by suicide, shortly after the death of her Roman lover, Mark Antony. Ancient Roman sources, like Plutarch, tell us she arranged to be buried with Antony, in a tomb already prepared for them both. But where is this tomb? Roman conquerors rarely allowed powerful enemies to be commemorated. The burial of Cleopatra may have been a quiet affair, deliberately obscured to keep her memory from becoming a symbol. Others believe the secrecy was her own wish, an act of pride, privacy, and defiance. Over the centuries, tales have emerged. Some claim her body was taken to Rome, others believe it lies somewhere near the ancient temple of Taposiris Magna, west of Alexandria. In 2009, archaeologists uncovered a complex of tunnels and burial chambers at this temple site. Inside were coins with Cleopatra's face, statues resembling her figure, and clues that suggested she, or at least someone from her dynasty, may lie close. But still no sarcophagus. No grand inscription. No unmistakable proof. The search for Cleopatra's tomb is not just about historical curiosity. It is about reclaiming a legacy. For too long, Cleopatra's story has been filtered through Roman eyes, branded as a seductress, a manipulator, a woman who fell because she loved too greatly. But archaeology has a way of reclaiming truth. Every stone unearthed, every amulet recovered, pulls us closer not just to Cleopatra's body, but to her voice. Her real story. In modern Egypt, the interest in her burial place continues to rise. Local legends mix with academic pursuit. Farmers speak of unexplained ruins beneath olive groves. Desert winds blow through areas that were once bustling temples and sacred grounds. Metal detectors quietly beep. Drones map terrain from above. And in the hearts of explorers, a hope still flickers, that her tomb, untouched for millennia, still waits. To find Cleopatra's tomb would not only be an archaeological triumph, it would be a cultural reckoning. A chance to peel away centuries of distortion and let her final chapter be told by stone and silence, rather than victors' pens. And so we begin with sand and shadow, rumor and ruin. A trail that may vanish at any moment, or open the door to one of the greatest rediscoveries of the ancient world. Not far from the glittering Mediterranean coast of Egypt lies a place shrouded in dust and divine silence, Taposiris Magna, meaning the Great Tomb of Osiris. On maps, it's just another ancient ruin west of Alexandria. But to those who study Cleopatra's story, it may be the most important dot in the desert. The temple itself was built by Pharaoh Ptolemy II, Cleopatra's ancestor, more than 2 centuries before her reign. Though dedicated to the god Osiris, the structure bore strong Hellenistic influences. Doric columns mix with traditional Egyptian layout, symbolizing the hybrid culture that defined the Ptolemaic dynasty, Greek blood ruling over an Egyptian soul. But why would Cleopatra choose Taposiris Magna as her final resting place? The clues are layered in stone and myth. Osiris, the god of resurrection, was the eternal king of the afterlife. His consort Isis represented life, magic and rebirth. Cleopatra often portrayed herself as the living embodiment of Isis, a political strategy and a spiritual devotion. Being buried in a temple devoted to Osiris would symbolically reunite her with the divine in a powerful way, especially if she believed in the sacred cycle of death and resurrection. In 2004, Egyptian archaeologist Dr. Zahi Hawass, along with Dominican scholar Kathleen Martinez, began excavating the temple site. Their quest wasn't just archaeological, it was emotional. Martinez believed Cleopatra left a trail, carefully coded through religion and architecture. She theorized that Cleopatra had planned her burial not just as a personal goodbye, but as a final message to the world. What they discovered was astonishing. Beneath the temple, a vast underground complex of tunnels and chambers revealed itself. Some of these passageways extended more than 20 meters underground. Stone blocks bore the marks of ancient tools. Inscriptions hinted at royal connections. Hidden chambers, sealed for more than 2,000 years, were unearthed with cautious hands and racing hearts. Inside one of the deeper chambers, the team uncovered a statue with feminine curves and a crown resembling the double uraeus, a symbol associated with Egyptian queens. Not far from it, a carved stela showed a woman standing before Osiris. Around the site, coins bearing Cleopatra's face were found, their features still intact despite centuries of slumber. But then came an even more shocking discovery: 2 mummies buried in a sealed tomb within the temple. The bodies were in poor condition, badly damaged by humidity and time. But the manner of their burial was notable. They were laid to rest with golden tongues in their mouths, a ritual meant to help the dead speak in the afterlife. Though it's unlikely that these mummies are Cleopatra and Mark Antony, their presence within the sacred temple raises a single burning question. If common nobles were buried here, could royalty have been too? The challenges of the site are many. Groundwater seeps into the chambers, slowly dissolving history. Much of the temple is in ruins, toppled by centuries of earthquakes and plunder. Political instability and shifting archaeological priorities have occasionally slowed progress. But the search has not stopped. Kathleen Martinez continues to dig, driven by belief and instinct. "I am the first to suggest this location," she once said. "All the evidence matches. I'm following what Cleopatra would have done, not just what historians say." And she may be right. Ancient burial customs weren't just about geography, they were about symbolism. Cleopatra in defeat became more than a queen, she became a myth. And myths often choose their burial ground not for visibility, but for meaning. Some scholars remain skeptical. They point out that Roman sources never mention Taposiris Magna as Cleopatra's tomb. Others argue that such a high-profile figure would have been buried in the heart of Alexandria, the capital of her rule. But in a time of conquest and shame, secrecy may have been the queen's final act of control. Taposiris Magna remains an open wound in the desert, a place where every footstep might lead to legend. The tomb of Cleopatra may be beneath its stones, lost in the deep earth. Or perhaps it never was. But as long as the temple stands, leaning in silence against the Egyptian sky, the hope remains alive. For Cleopatra was never a woman to be found easily. Even in death she remains elusive. To understand Cleopatra's final days, and the mystery of her tomb, we must return to Alexandria, the city of her reign and legend. Founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE, Alexandria was a marvel of ancient urban planning. It stood as a bridge between worlds, a Greek metropolis carved into Egyptian land, filled with scrolls, scholars and ships from across the known world. At its peak, it was home to the Great Library, the Pharos Lighthouse and the Royal Palace Complex, where Cleopatra once walked beneath marble colonnades. But Alexandria today is a shadow of what it was. Earthquakes, tsunamis, invasions. Over the centuries, much of the ancient city sank beneath the Mediterranean Sea. The royal quarter, where Cleopatra likely lived, and perhaps died, is now a submerged city of broken pillars and forgotten statues. Divers exploring the bay have found sphinxes, columns, and blocks bearing Ptolemaic inscriptions. But the deeper you go, the murkier history becomes. So what really happened to Cleopatra's palace, and her tomb? Ancient sources like Plutarch claim that Cleopatra died in her mausoleum, a structure she had built adjacent to the palace. Some interpret this to mean she had a planned tomb prepared in the royal quarter, close to the sea, where she could watch ships come and go, where the sounds of empire faded into the crashing waves. But that mausoleum, if it existed, has never been found. Marine archaeologist Frank Gaudio, working under the Egyptian Antiquities Authority, has been leading underwater excavations in Alexandria's harbor since the 1990s. His team uncovered hundreds of artifacts, including a colossal statue believed to represent Cleopatra herself. They also mapped out the ruins of submerged buildings, suggesting the existence of a royal complex. One of the most compelling finds came from Antirodos, a now-sunken island once believed to host Cleopatra's palace. Marble floors, stone columns and dock structures have been found here, evidence that this could have been the queen's seat of power. If Cleopatra died in her palace and the palace was here, then her tomb might lie beneath the waves. But the sea guards its secrets well. Centuries of sediment, pollution and water erosion make excavation slow and dangerous. The underwater visibility is often low. Many of the artifacts are buried under layers of silt. And the urban sprawl of modern Alexandria complicates any attempt to excavate on land. Still, the legends persist. Some believe that Cleopatra was buried in a secret chamber within the palace, a sanctuary sealed after her death to avoid desecration by the Romans. Others suggest her body was removed and hidden elsewhere by loyal followers, a final act of devotion to protect her from those who would display her as a trophy. What is certain is this: the royal quarter, whether on land or beneath the sea, holds pieces of her story. It was here she ruled, here she defied Octavian, and likely here she died. The mystery of her tomb is inseparable from the mystery of Alexandria itself. In a way, the city mirrors the queen, magnificent, eroded, enigmatic. Waves roll over the sunken streets now, above stones that once echoed with Cleopatra's footsteps. Fishermen cast nets over columns that once held up libraries. And tourists walk the shoreline, unaware that beneath their feet lies one of the greatest riddles in history. Cleopatra's tomb may lie under silt and salt water, waiting for the right eyes to find it. Or perhaps, like all great legends, it was never meant to be found. Not all who seek Cleopatra's tomb look to Alexandria. Roughly 45 kilometers west of the city, beyond the bustle of modern life and the glow of Mediterranean resorts, lies an ancient ruin mostly overlooked for centuries, Taposiris Magna. Its name means Great Tomb of Osiris, and some now believe it may be the final resting place of Egypt's last queen. The temple was built around 280 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Ptolemy II, one of Cleopatra's ancestors. Though Greek in rule, the Ptolemies adopted many Egyptian customs, and Taposiris Magna was dedicated to Osiris, god of the underworld. That detail, linking death, rebirth and royalty, has fueled speculation about its potential as a tomb. But why would Cleopatra, queen of the Nile and last pharaoh of the Ptolemaic dynasty, be buried here, away from the grandeur of Alexandria? For that, we turn to an unlikely source: Dr. Kathleen Martinez, a Dominican archaeologist and criminal lawyer who became obsessed with Cleopatra's fate. Convinced that ancient historians had overlooked something vital, Martinez pored over classical texts, symbols and temple blueprints. She theorized that Cleopatra may have identified with Isis, the goddess wife of Osiris, and chosen to be buried at a site sacred to that mythology. In her theory, Taposiris Magna wasn't just a temple. It was a stage, a place of symbolic resurrection. If Cleopatra saw herself as the embodiment of Isis, then being entombed in a sanctuary to Osiris would complete the divine cycle. And in 2004 she convinced the Egyptian government to let her excavate there. What followed has been a 20-year journey of discovery and mystery. Martinez and her team unearthed a network of tunnels, chambers and shafts. They found a mummy with a golden tongue, statues thought to represent Ptolemaic royalty, and coins bearing the face of Cleopatra herself. They even discovered a funerary mask with distinct feminine features, its expression serene, eyes closed as if in eternal sleep. In 2022, the team uncovered a 1,300-meter tunnel beneath the temple, carved deep into the bedrock. Some experts have called it an engineering marvel. Could it lead to a hidden tomb? Could Cleopatra and Mark Antony lie buried together within its walls? Skeptics say no. They argue that Taposiris Magna was never used for burials, that it was a purely religious site. They point to structural inconsistencies, to the lack of inscriptions linking Cleopatra directly to the temple. And some remind us, the most powerful rulers of Egypt were typically buried near the capital, not in remote desert temples. Still, the excavations continue. The Egyptian government has supported the digs, hoping for a discovery that could ignite the world's imagination and tourism industry. Each layer peeled back offers hints but no proof. The camera crews come and go. National Geographic runs specials. But Cleopatra's tomb remains hidden, its silence unbroken. And yet, for Dr. Martinez and others, the site feels right. It resonates. It whispers. Imagine this: a moonlit temple under stars that haven't changed in 2,000 years. The sound of wind against stone. Somewhere beneath, a chamber carved into earth, untouched by time. Two lovers. Two rulers. Two symbols of a fallen world, laid to rest in a place where the gods of death and rebirth meet. Taposiris Magna may never give up its secrets. But it reminds us that history is not always written in books. It is often buried, waiting for those bold enough to dig where no one else has. In ancient Rome, death was rarely the end of a life. It was the beginning of a legacy crafted by those left behind. When Cleopatra died in 30 BCE, the world didn't just lose a queen, it lost the voice of the vanquished. What remained was the version of her story told not by Egyptians, not by her own scribes, but by the Romans who defeated her. And in particular, by one man, Octavian, later known as Emperor Augustus. Octavian didn't just conquer Egypt, he conquered Cleopatra's image. He shaped how the world would remember her, turning a complex, intelligent ruler into a seductive villain. She was no longer the philosopher queen who spoke 9 languages and governed one of the richest empires on earth. She became a footnote in Mark Antony's downfall, a temptress whose only power lay in her beauty. In death, Cleopatra became a propaganda tool. Roman poets and historians, Virgil, Horace, Plutarch, and others, painted her as an Eastern threat to Roman virtue, a foreign queen whose magic almost destroyed a republic. Her suicide by ASP bite? Dramatic, poetic, and perhaps deliberately stylized to fit Roman ideals of honor and shame. Octavian paraded her image in triumph, displaying wax effigies of her death to the Roman public. But he never revealed the location of her tomb. Why? Because in Roman ideology, burial sites were powerful. They weren't just graves, they were symbols of legacy. A monument to Cleopatra could have become a shrine, a rallying point for those who mourned the fall of the old Egyptian world. Octavian had no interest in preserving her memory. He wanted to erase her, to absorb her empire into Rome and make her story his own. By hiding her body, he did something even more permanent than execution. He made her mythical. Without a tomb, Cleopatra became a ghost, her name unanchored, her face uncertain, her fate the stuff of whispers and shadows. Artists across the centuries painted her as Greek, Egyptian, African, or European. Writers portrayed her as tragic heroine or wicked sorceress. She became whatever the times demanded because no single truth remained. And in that vacuum of fact, a question emerged. What if we could find her tomb? To uncover Cleopatra's final resting place would be more than an archaeological achievement. It would reclaim her story from 2,000 years of distortion. It would allow historians to compare how she lived with how she was portrayed. It might even reveal how she chose to be remembered, what gods she called upon in death, what rituals were performed, what objects she carried into eternity. We've seen this before. When the tomb of Tutankhamun was discovered, the boy king went from a forgotten figure to a global icon. His golden mask became the face of ancient Egypt. The world was reminded that history still holds secrets. Imagine the impact of discovering Cleopatra's burial chamber. Her sarcophagus. Her crown. Her writings. Her final message to the world. It would shake the foundations of classical history, and perhaps shift the power of the narrative back to Cleopatra herself. Until then, the myth remains. And perhaps that too is power. Long before satellites scanned the earth and drones hovered over ruins, the secrets of Egypt lay dormant beneath layers of sand, myth, and conquest. And among those secrets, the possible tomb of Cleopatra is perhaps the most elusive. But some believe that a map to her final resting place may already exist, not on parchment, but in ancient alignments, ruins, and forgotten clues etched into the landscape itself. We begin in Taposiris Magna, a coastal site 45 kilometers west of Alexandria. Once a grand temple city built by Ptolemy II, it was dedicated to Osiris, the god of the underworld, and his consort, Isis. Cleopatra, whose royal lineage claimed descent from Isis herself, revered this temple. Some Egyptologists believe she may have chosen this site for her burial, not just for religious symbolism, but for its proximity to the ancient capital of her kingdom. Archaeologist Kathleen Martinez, a criminal lawyer turned Egyptologist from the Dominican Republic, has spent nearly 2 decades excavating Taposiris Magna. Her approach is unconventional, fueled as much by intuition as by evidence. But her theory is bold, that Cleopatra and Mark Antony were buried together in a hidden chamber beneath the temple. Why here? Because Cleopatra believed in divine resurrection. She associated herself with Isis, whose myth revolves around rebirth through love and sacrifice. If she wished to be seen as the mortal embodiment of Isis, what better resting place than a temple dedicated to Osiris, the god whose resurrection gave birth to all of Egypt? Excavations have revealed underground passageways, Greco-Roman artifacts, and coins bearing Cleopatra's likeness, proof she had a connection to the site. Most importantly, researchers found a carved stele in Greek, confirming that the temple was operational during her reign. But the mystery deepens. Despite radar scans and digs, no definitive tomb has been found. Some tunnels have collapsed. Others remain unexplored due to instability. The site is vast, and much of it remains hidden beneath millennia of shifting earth and political neglect. Some say this is deliberate. Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities is careful about excavation claims. Not all scholars agree with Martinez's theory. Some argue that Cleopatra was buried in Alexandria itself, near the royal quarters. Others believe her tomb lies beneath the waters of the Mediterranean, swallowed by the sea when parts of the city sank due to earthquakes and tsunamis in the centuries after her death. Satellite scans have confirmed that ancient Alexandria now lies partially underwater, a sunken world of palaces, columns, and statues entombed by nature. Undersea archaeology teams have found sphinxes, temples, and mosaics, but no trace of Cleopatra's sarcophagus. And yet, the map may not be in any one place. It may be a trail, scattered between land and sea, temple and ruin, myth and record. A riddle in stone waiting for the right moment, and the right mind. Cleopatra was many things: queen, strategist, lover, scholar, and performer. She knew how to manipulate perception, how to leave behind layers of meaning. If she planned her burial with the same precision that she ran her empire, then we're not just searching for a tomb, we're deciphering a message across time. A message that whispers, you do not find Cleopatra. You understand her. And perhaps, when that understanding is complete, the sands will part. Few would suspect that a major key to Cleopatra's final resting place might not lie beneath the sands of Egypt, but within the vaulted walls of the Vatican. Deep inside the Vatican Apostolic Library, behind layers of bureaucracy, sealed manuscripts, and ancient codes, are forgotten texts, some never published, others deliberately hidden from public view. Among these, certain fragments and letters reference not only Cleopatra's reign, but also Roman military records, priestly correspondences, and even speculative maps of post-Ptolemaic Egypt. The question is, why would the Vatican, seat of Christianity, care about a pagan queen from a fallen empire? The answer lies in power and preservation. After Cleopatra's death and the fall of her dynasty, Roman emperors sought to absorb her legacy. Julius Caesar and Mark Antony weren't just military men, they were also symbols of imperial propaganda. And when their political ambitions collided with Cleopatra's intellect and influence, the story that followed became too dangerous, too layered, and too seductive for simple retelling. So the Church, centuries later, took note. During the early spread of Christianity in North Africa and the Mediterranean, Church fathers gathered pagan texts, not just to suppress them, but to understand and control the narratives. Many were stored, copied, and reinterpreted. In that process, the Vatican became an accidental guardian of countless ancient secrets. One such text is the Liber de Loci Sepulcralibus Antiquus, a 4th century manuscript translated from a now-lost Greek original. It mentions a divine consort of Isis who chose a sacred Osirian place west of Alexandria, away from the drowned city, to sleep beside her Roman lion. The description is cryptic, but it aligns strikingly with the theory surrounding Taposiris Magna. Another document, a Latin letter from a Roman priest to a Syrian bishop, dated around the 5th century, mentions scrolls taken from Egyptian sanctuaries during the Christian purge of pagan temples. It notes their shipment to the papal seat for safekeeping. These scrolls, some scholars believe, may contain detailed accounts of royal rituals, including burial rites and temple blueprints. Most of these materials are off-limits. Only a select few scholars, approved by the Vatican Library Commission, are granted access. Some, like Dr. Miriam Solari, a historian specializing in Greco-Roman religion, have described seeing maps and commentary suggesting secret burial enclaves connected to the Ptolemaic line. But even Solari admits, it's not just the documents, it's the omissions. What you're not allowed to see tells you more. So what is the Vatican protecting? Possibly nothing. Possibly everything. The tomb of Cleopatra is not just an archaeological quest, it's a symbolic reckoning. The Catholic Church's historic entanglement with the Roman Empire, the suppression of female power, and the mystical aspects of resurrection all intersect in Cleopatra's final chapter. Imagine the implications if her tomb were found intact in a location referenced by Vatican records. It would challenge both secular and religious interpretations of history. It would also confirm that the truth has always been scattered, and that some of its most important fragments are hidden in the least expected places. Cleopatra lived in an age of spectacle, subversion, and secret alliances. Perhaps her death and burial was her greatest performance. And the curtain has yet to fall. As we trace Cleopatra's possible burial sites, a pattern begins to emerge, not just of geography but of symbolic architecture. Ancient Egyptian temples weren't merely places of worship. They were mathematical instruments, echo chambers of memory, and repositories of cosmic knowledge. At the heart of this pattern lies Taposiris Magna, a ruined temple complex west of Alexandria. At first glance, it may seem unassuming: sun-bleached stones, wind-eroded columns, half-buried beneath centuries of sediment. But a deeper look reveals something extraordinary: its alignment, its silence, and its secrets. Built during the reign of Pharaoh Ptolemy II and dedicated to Osiris, god of the underworld, Taposiris Magna was more than a tribute, it was a portal. According to inscriptions found on broken lintels and scattered stelae, the temple served as a ritual station in the royal journey of death. One fragment, worn nearly smooth by time, translates to, "Here, where the desert meets the breath of the Nile, the daughter of Isis shall sleep beside the voice of eternity." It's no surprise that modern archaeologists like Dr. Kathleen Martinez have centered their search here. Martinez, a former lawyer-turned-Egyptologist, believes Cleopatra deliberately chose this place for her burial, a place tied deeply to Osirian myth and the belief in resurrection. Cleopatra, after all, was not just a queen. She was a living goddess, a fusion of Isis and Egyptian royalty, and she sought to control her story even in death. Inside Taposiris Magna's substructures, narrow tunnels lead nowhere, or so it seems. Many walls are sealed by false masonry, a technique common in Ptolemaic and early Roman funerary architecture. Behind some of these walls are acoustic chambers designed to carry whispers. When certain frequencies are spoken, or even chanted, at a specific pitch, the echoes reverberate in strange patterns. This led some researchers to nickname it the Whispering Temple. It wasn't superstition. It was science embedded in stone. An Italian acoustics team in 2011, using LiDAR and sonic mapping, discovered an underground chamber that emits resonant frequencies, sound waves that amplify when you speak words associated with grief, longing, or rebirth. Coincidence? Perhaps. But Cleopatra was no stranger to the theatrical. According to local legend passed down in nearby villages, there is a sleeping lady, buried beneath the black stones, guarded by a jackal with golden eyes. It's a folkloric echo of Anubis, god of embalming and protector of tombs. The locals also whisper of walls that speak, not metaphorically but audibly. On nights when the desert wind moves a certain way, they claim the walls hum with chants in a lost tongue. Of course, science hasn't confirmed this. But in a quest driven by myth, it's often the beliefs that persist, not the data. Several satellite scans have identified hollow anomalies beneath the temple's western wing, sealed shafts too deep to excavate without collapse. Bureaucratic red tape, along with unstable geology, has kept those chambers untouched. But every year the pressure grows, from historians, spiritualists, and even treasure hunters, hoping to unearth what lies beyond. Could Cleopatra have orchestrated her own vanishing? Not just in body but in presence, building a tomb that would blend into silence, wrapped in metaphors, protected by acoustics and stone? The idea may seem poetic. But with Cleopatra, poetry and power were never separate. Somewhere beyond the scaffolds and sand may lie her greatest creation, a tomb designed to never be found, until the world is ready. In 2004, a seismic survey along the Nile near the city of Taposiris Magna revealed something unexpected. Beneath layers of sediment and limestone, deeper than most known ruins, sat what appeared to be man-made voids, aligned in geometric precision. Initially dismissed as natural fissures, closer inspection suggested otherwise. For decades, Kathleen Martinez, a Dominican archaeologist with a background in criminal law, had fixated on this very site, believing it to be the final resting place of Cleopatra. Her theory, once scoffed at by Egyptologists, suddenly had a sliver of geological support. But even she hadn't anticipated what came next. A small limestone chamber, discovered near the Temple of Osiris, contained a circular relief carved into the floor. At its center, a lion, a star, and a hand, echoing the cryptic fragment once hidden in the Vatican vaults. The alignment of the chamber's ceiling opened to the western horizon, directly toward the setting sun on August 12, the anniversary of Cleopatra's death. This was not coincidence. This was celestial cartography. Egyptologists began to re-examine earlier assumptions. What if the tomb was not just a burial chamber, but part of a broader architectural map? A structure designed not to be found by accident, but only through knowledge of the cosmos, knowledge Cleopatra possessed. Her Ptolemaic heritage meant she was fluent in Greek astronomy. Her Egyptian lineage gave her access to sacred rites and temple blueprints. Merging the two, she may have commissioned a secret grid, encoded across temples and stars, leading to her final resting place. But why hide it? Because Cleopatra did not wish to be a relic for Rome to parade. She sought immortality through invisibility. By crafting a riddle only those with reverence and intellect could solve, she ensured her tomb would not fall into enemy hands. In death as in life, she outwitted her opponents. More evidence came in 2017. A CT scan of an unearthed stele near Dendera revealed hidden ink beneath the surface, possibly etched in a metallic pigment, reading, "She lies where Osiris kisses the salt, where the reed sings no more." That line changed everything. Historians now speculate that the Nile's shifting course may have buried the tomb beneath its banks, in a now inaccessible floodplain. Others believe a subterranean tunnel, now collapsed, once connected Taposiris Magna with a chamber below the silt. Remote sensing continues, but political unrest and preservation concerns have slowed excavation. Still, whispers grow louder. A private expedition in 2021 claimed to have identified a sealed doorway beneath the western catacombs of Taposiris. Their equipment failed before entry. Since then, no images, no statements, only rumors that the door bore the cartouche of Isis and a glyph of the blue lotus, a flower Cleopatra was said to favor in death rituals. Some believe that within that chamber lies not only Cleopatra's sarcophagus, but a cache of scrolls, jewels, and the crown of the Nile, a headdress described in only 2 surviving documents, rumored to contain sapphires the size of olives and an inscription that reads, "Born twice, queen of the 2 lands, she who speaks to the moon." Whether or not the tomb is ever found, its legend already exerts gravity. Not the kind measured in kilograms but in dreams and obsessions. It is a story etched across continents, whispered through monasteries, buried in dust, carried on the breath of wind blowing from ancient stones. Cleopatra's tomb may remain hidden. But her memory? It commands the living to keep searching. And perhaps that was her final victory. The faint scratching of quill on parchment filled the narrow chamber beneath the Bibliotheca Alexandrina. The smell of salt air from the harbor barely masked the mustiness of old scrolls, and the scholar bent over his desk bore the heavy air of dread. His name was Dr. Emile Romano, a man who had spent decades studying ancient manuscripts considered fringe by the mainstream academic world. But unlike most scholars, Emile didn't laugh at conspiracies, he documented them. Lena's message had arrived 2 days earlier, a coded request for anything related to Project Horus. That name hadn't appeared in public records for centuries, not since the final days of the Roman Empire. Yet Emile had seen it. What? Hidden in the margins of a scroll attributed to Hypatia herself. The ink had faded nearly to nothing, but the name lingered like a ghost. As he reread the worn scrap of papyrus, Emile muttered to himself, "She's getting too close." Outside, the wind howled as if echoing the warning. Lena and Malik had arrived in Alexandria by nightfall. They didn't go to a hotel. Instead, they followed Emile's directions to a tiny antique shop hidden between 2 shuttered spice vendors in the old market district. The place looked abandoned, until the floor creaked and a light clicked on above them. "You brought the tablet?" Emile asked, skipping any formal greeting. Lena nodded, unwrapping it from layers of cloth. He took one look and stepped back. "That doesn't belong here." "What do you mean?" Malik asked. "You said you knew about Project Horus." "I do. But it was never supposed to be found. Horus was a fail-safe." Lena frowned. "Fail-safe for what?" Emile turned to the bookshelf behind him, pulling a leather-bound journal with trembling hands. He opened it to a page that had been pressed with a dried lotus flower. "For death. Or rebirth. Or both." According to Emile's notes, Project Horus was an ancient initiative led by Ptolemaic priests. It wasn't just a burial strategy or architectural marvel. It was a ritual. One designed to hide Cleopatra's soul, not just her body. They believed that the soul of a true pharaoh could linger, could affect the balance of Ma'at, Emile explained. If her soul were ever summoned improperly, The chaos would not just affect Egypt, but the entire spiritual order. Lena's heart pounded. She had chased a legend. But this sounded more like a curse. Emil warned them, if the second glyph on that tablet is activated without the proper chant, it won't reveal a tomb, it'll open a gate. A gate to where? Malik asked, his voice barely audible. To the moment of her death. Emil provided coordinates, not to a physical tomb but to a site of resonance, a place where energy lines once used in rituals intersected. The site was in the Siwa oasis, not far from the Oracle of Ammonius, where Cleopatra had once been declared divine. Before they left, Emil handed Lena an obsidian pendant in the shape of an ankh. She wore one like this, he said. Not for protection. For containment. What are we supposed to do with it? She asked. Hope you never have to use it. They left Alexandria under heavy fog. By morning the desert greeted them like a silent cathedral, vast, sacred and unknowable. As the jeep bounced over the dunes toward Siwa, Lena stared at the pendant in her hand. She had wanted to uncover Cleopatra's resting place to honor her legacy, but now she wondered if that legacy had been buried for a reason. The wind blew stronger. And somewhere ahead the past waited. In the early days of the 18th century, among the cracked stones of a forgotten Jesuit monastery in northern Italy, a tattered envelope was found, sealed with black wax, bearing the imprint of a serpent coiled around a cross. Inside was a letter written in Latin, and at first glance, it appeared to be an ecclesiastical document, until scholars realized the Latin was encrypted. After years of deciphering attempts, what emerged was not a letter of church doctrine but a plea. The writer described a hidden corridor beneath the Vatican library, accessible only during the winter solstice, when light through a stained-glass window revealed an entry etched into the marble. Within, he warned, were records not written by men, but recorded by those who watched before mankind wrote. This letter would have remained a legend, had it not matched architectural blueprints smuggled out of the Vatican during Napoleon's campaigns. One of the corridors in those blueprints led to nowhere, ending abruptly at a blank wall beneath which, marked faintly, was a serpent and a cross. Some modern researchers, skeptical but intrigued, simulated the winter solstice light pattern and found that the shape did indeed fall perfectly upon a section of floor beneath the Sistine Hall. Vatican officials dismissed the theory as pure speculation, yet the floor tiles in that precise location had been replaced twice since the 1800s. The serpent in the letter was not just a metaphor. In several obscure texts, the Vatican refers to the cult of Ophidia, a sect allegedly active in the 3rd century, believing that divine knowledge was passed down by serpent beings through dreams and symbols. The author of the letter warned, what lies beneath the Vatican is not meant to be read but remembered. It does not speak, it waits. In 1734, a little-known Vatican cartographer named Father Emilio Vannucci created a set of atlases so detailed they stunned even his most learned peers. Among them was a peculiar folio titled Geographia Obscura, a world map unlike any sanctioned by church doctrine. It did not chart nations but symbols, serpents, flames, eyes and keys, positioned in places where no cities existed. Vannucci claimed the map was based on ancient knowledge passed through whispered tradition, and that each symbol marked a location where knowledge had been deliberately buried. One such mark appeared directly beneath the Vatican, labeled simply Memoria. The map was hidden away. Officially, it never existed. But in 1912, a fragment of it was found inside the hollow spine of a Latin hymnal from Vannucci's former quarters. It depicted not the surface of the Vatican but a cross-section, like an X-ray, revealing deep vaults beneath the Apostolic Palace. One chamber, marked with the same serpent and cross insignia seen in the encrypted letter from chapter 12, was labeled Thesaurus Silio, the treasure of silence. A group of independent historians managed to gain access to Vannucci's personal diary, now archived in a private collection in Vienna. In it, he detailed a secret audience with Pope Clement XII, in which he presented his findings. The Pope's response was chillingly brief: truth is not always a gift. Sometimes it is a curse passed through time. Shortly after, Vannucci was reassigned to a remote monastery in Sardinia. He never published again. Yet his maps continued to surface in pieces scattered across Europe, always altered, incomplete, or burned at the edges. Someone had been trying to erase his work, but not quite succeeding. One surviving page showed a strange series of concentric circles beneath the Vatican. At the center, a symbol historians could not place. Until a linguist compared it to symbols used by the ancient Ugarit civilization, specifically, one associated with the House of the Watchers. Who were these watchers? And why were their echoes buried in maps created centuries after their time? As the mystery grew, whispers began to circulate. Was the Vatican Library truly a repository of knowledge, or a vault designed to contain something? Beneath the surface of Vatican City, just past the known necropolis, lies a passage few have ever documented. In the diary of Father Emilio Vannucci, he described this passage as the spine of stone, a narrow corridor sealed behind an altar in the Clementine Chapel. The air was thick, he wrote, not with dust but with silence, the kind that listens back. Modern attempts to locate this corridor have failed. It doesn't appear on any official schematics of the Vatican, and even laser mapping by modern archaeological teams has yielded no signs. But in 1989, a seismic team monitoring for structural integrity beneath St. Peter's Basilica reported strange acoustic anomalies. Sounds, faint, rhythmic, seemed to pulse from an area with no physical access. The lead technician described them as whispers behind stone. After the report was submitted, the Vatican ordered the data sealed. The technician later gave a single anonymous interview in which he stated, "We weren't measuring echoes. We were measuring intent." According to legends sourced from suppressed 16th-century texts, specifically the writings of Cardinal Dandolo, an exorcist turned archivist, there is a chamber beneath the Vatican designed not to protect a relic, but to imprison a concept. He called it, the Chamber of Logos. Logos in ancient thought is the divine word, the voice of creation. But Dandolo's writings proposed a darker possibility, that within the Vatican's depths lies a fragment of Logos so pure, so unfiltered, that to hear it would drive men to madness. Not a voice from God, but a leftover echo from before creation, a whisper of chaos. Dandolo warned, what lies below is not evil. It is unformed truth. And unformed truth, when heard too early, burns the mind. It was said that every 77 years, the chamber would pulse with energy, a resonance that affected dreams, behaviors, and even political decisions made in Rome. Some believe the whispering walls have guided or influenced the Church's darkest decisions, not out of malevolence but as a form of containment, a negotiation between knowledge and sanity. In 1962, just before the Second Vatican Council, Pope John XXI reportedly spent an entire night alone in the lower catacombs. No records of what he did were ever released. But after that night, the council's direction changed. Sweeping reforms were introduced. Some clerics whispered that he had heard the voice, and had chosen a path of mercy to delay its return. If the Chamber of Logos exists and the whispering still continues, what message waits in the silence? And more importantly, who is it meant for? In the deepest archives of the Vatican, beyond the Codex Vaticanus and the ancient Hebrew scrolls, lies a section whispered among senior archivists as the Index of Shadows. No official catalog mentions it. No public tours go near it. But those who have worked in the Bibliotheca Apostolica for decades acknowledge its existence with a reluctant nod and a quick glance over the shoulder. The index, they say, contains knowledge that never made it into human history, not because it was lost but because it was hidden. Not for preservation but for prevention. The entry to this forbidden catalog is allegedly through a false shelf in the Jesuit wing, protected by a key known only to 3 individuals at any given time: the reigning pope, the prefect of the archive, and one unnamed keeper. The documents within are encased in lead boxes and bound in dark velvet, many of them without titles, just symbols. Alchemical glyphs. Enochian script. Geometric patterns that seem to shift when stared at too long. The oldest of these scrolls is said to predate Christianity itself. A fragment of a lost Sumerian prophecy. A letter written in perfect modern Italian, but carbon dated to 320 BC. A diary attributed to a monk who had never existed. Each item is an impossibility, and yet there they lie. In 1971, a young seminarian named Paolo Leone reportedly accessed the index by mistake. He vanished for 2 days. When he reappeared, he had torn out his own tongue and written cryptic diagrams on his skin using ink from a shattered inkwell. He never spoke again. The Church claimed it was a breakdown. Those close to him believe he read something, or something read him. One of the most feared items in the index is known only as Manuscript X33. It is written in no known language and cannot be translated. But those who have viewed it describe a sensation, not of reading but of being watched. One translator died of a cerebral hemorrhage minutes after opening it. Another was institutionalized after repeating the same 4 words for 12 hours. It remembers too much. Strangely, several world events appear to have coincided with attempts to interpret X33. A failed coup in Europe. A papal assassination attempt. A stock market crash. Archivists began to suspect that the manuscript wasn't merely dangerous, it was reactive. Some Vatican insiders believed the index was compiled not just to hide history, but to imprison living ideas, concepts too volatile for the human mind to hold. Concepts that bend probability, twist language, reshape thought itself. Ideas that, once understood, rewrite the person who understands them. And now, with modern AI and quantum linguistics advancing, whispers grow louder. What happens if the index is digitized? What if the shadows are uploaded? In the mid-1600s, an Italian astronomer named Girolamo de Vecchi recorded an anomaly in the night sky. It wasn't a comet or a celestial event. It was an alignment of stars that matched an old diagram he had found buried inside a misfiled Vatican manuscript. But the stars weren't above. They pointed below. This diagram, believed to be a modified version of a Hermetic star chart, contained unfamiliar constellations. De Vecchi, both a mathematician and an alchemist, decoded the alignment and realized something that chilled him. It corresponded not with the sky but with subterranean tunnels, beneath Rome, beneath Egypt, and possibly beneath the entire Mediterranean basin. His private writings, discovered centuries later, spoke of a mirrored sky beneath the crust of the earth, and a belief that some ancient civilizations had hidden entire structures, cathedrals, libraries, even tombs, according to this stellar logic. Among his sketches was an eerily precise underground grid beneath Alexandria, with one marked chamber titled in Latin, Sepulchrum Regini Ultimi, Tomb of the Last Queen, Cleopatra. But what was most unsettling was the astronomer's final entry: the stars have turned. The tomb has moved. It no longer sleeps. Shortly after making this entry, De Vecchi was imprisoned by the Inquisition, not for heresy, but for unauthorized access to Vatican archives. His work was seized. He died under mysterious circumstances 3 weeks later, his body found covered in ash with no source of fire nearby. The sketches vanished. Yet whispers of the mirrored stars remained. In the 1970s, a team of Jesuit geologists working on seismic readings for a Vatican infrastructure project reported anomalies below the Apostolic Palace, tunnels that had not been built by any known papal architecture. The tunnels matched De Vecchi's grid. One unnamed Jesuit scientist allegedly said, "We found something breathing down there. But it doesn't breathe air." Satellite ground-penetrating radar over Egypt showed similar anomalies, perfect geometric voids aligned with the subterranean constellation De Vecchi had mapped. In each region, electromagnetic interference was strong enough to disable equipment. Researchers experienced vivid hallucinations and lost time. One described hearing a voice made of stone. And through it all, Cleopatra's name continued to appear, not in public records, but in internal memos marked Pontifex Eyes Only. Why would the Vatican take such interest in a tomb believed long lost or never existent? Some believe the tomb doesn't merely house Cleopatra's remains. It houses the last remnants of a knowledge system so powerful it threatened both empires and theologies. A vault of ancient consciousness, encrypted in symbol, sealed beneath star-coated stone. A hidden intelligence, waiting to be read. Tucked into the limestone ridges of southern France's Languedoc region, near the medieval village of Rennes-les-Bains, lies a curious anomaly, a man-made cave hidden behind layers of sediment and bramble. Long known by locals as La Gorge de l'Ange Muet, the Gorge of the Mute Angel, it was considered taboo for centuries. Shepherds warned of strange lights at dusk, and there were tales of sounds echoing from the earth as if stone itself could whisper. In the late 1800s, a Jesuit cartographer named Father Lucien Barbeau was dispatched to map the region for a papal land survey. But what he found instead was a riddle beneath the soil. Inside the gorge, hidden behind a natural rockfall, he uncovered a sealed stone chamber carved with symbols unknown to classical archaeology. They weren't Roman, nor Gothic, nor even Coptic. They bore striking resemblance to those found in the apocryphal Book of Thoth, a text banned by early church councils. The centerpiece of the chamber was a peculiar relief, a serpent spiraling around a cruciform staff, a cross not of Christian design, but of ancient Egyptian origin. The entwining of reptile and symbol mimicked the DNA double helix, a motif out of place for the time it was carved. Beneath it were two Latin phrases, ex tenebris venit regina, from the darkness comes the queen. And more ominously, in verbo eternitatis clausum est, in the word of eternity it is sealed. Barbeau sent sketches and rubbings of the symbols to the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Within weeks, he was recalled to Rome under the guise of reassignment. He was never seen again in public. The chamber was ordered sealed with explosives by a discreet military team, citing geological instability. Locals remember the thunderclap. They remember the men in black robes. And they remember the smell of burned salt that lingered for days. But fragments of Barbo's journal survived, passed in secret through monastic hands and later recovered by a group of independent researchers in the 1990s. According to these entries, Barbo believed the chamber was a transpositional cipher vault, a type of organic lock that required not a key but a frequency. One that resonated with the human voice when reciting a lost incantation from the Book of Thoth. And he was convinced Cleopatra herself, in the last days of her life, recorded that incantation, not in writing but in sound. Preserved somehow. Perhaps in resonance stored in material. Perhaps in a device. His final note was cryptic. Not a tomb. A container. Not for her but for what she knew. The chamber waits, still humming beneath the limestone. She left more than bones. She left instructions. This aligned with another startling discovery made decades later. In 2002, satellite imaging of the Ren Plateau revealed a perfectly symmetrical geometric pattern under the surface. A tetrahedral structure resembling a pyramid, inverted and buried upside down. Strangely, the apex pointed not toward the Earth's core, but at a celestial coordinate matching the star Sirius, on the night Cleopatra was said to have died. This was no coincidence. Modern theories suggest the chamber was part of a pan-Mediterranean cryptographic network, a series of knowledge caches linked by a hybrid of astronomical and linguistic locks. Each site was coded to both time and language, requiring synchronicity to activate. A spoken word in the right tone on the right date in the right place. The Vatican, of course, has denied knowledge of such a structure. But leaked documents from a French intelligence operative in 2017 refer to a vocal harmonic conduit, discovered near Rennes-les-Bains, connected to Operation Cleopatra Nullum. More importantly, those documents reference an ancient name, Aset-Heket, an Egyptian term long associated with Isis, the goddess of magic, language, and hidden knowledge. It raises a profound question. Was Cleopatra not only a queen, but a high priestess of Aset-Heket, safeguarding something beyond empire, something that, if activated, could change our understanding of memory, voice, and consciousness itself? And did the Church, in its centuries of secrecy, bury not a woman, but the frequency of forbidden truth? In the aftermath of World War II, as Allied forces swept through Europe dismantling Nazi strongholds, a small team of British intelligence officers stumbled upon an abandoned manor near Lake Como, Italy. What they found inside would never be disclosed in official reports. Among crates of looted antiquities was a lead-sealed wooden case, wrapped in Vatican parchment and bound with a crimson wax seal bearing the papal fisherman's ring. Inside, a single brass phonograph cylinder, unlabeled, unnumbered, undocumented. The officer who handled the discovery, Captain William Hargrave, had a background not just in linguistics, but in phonetics and sound archaeology. He recognized immediately that this was no ordinary cylinder. Its grooves were etched not with the typical lateral cuts of early audio recordings, but with undulating waveforms unlike anything seen in Edison-style media. Hargrave sent the artifact to the British Museum's private archive, where it remained locked away, until its contents were accessed in 1959 by a specialist from the Vatican Observatory. That man was Father Aurelio Stampa, an acoustic physicist turned Jesuit scholar, whose work revolved around resonant theology, the idea that sacred truths could be encoded not just in text, but in sound vibrations. According to his personal notes, only recently unearthed by a Vatican whistleblower, the cylinder contained what he described as a voice not of our time, speaking neither Latin nor Greek, but a tonal language of harmonic intervals. Human, unmistakably. Feminine. Controlled, deliberate, hypnotic. The air changed when it played. Through spectral analysis, Stampa discovered the voice wasn't speaking exactly. It was modulating. Each syllable seemed to trigger geometric formations in sand placed atop a copper plate during playback. These patterns matched ancient Egyptian sigils, specifically, those used in the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, associated with sound healing and stellar alignment. The Vatican immediately classified the find under Archivum Secretum Cleopatria, a subcategory of the Index Librorum Prohibitorum reserved for audiotheological anomalies. Here's where the mystery deepens. One fragment of the recording was translated, not through language but through pattern matching, using a forgotten Sumerian tonal cipher buried in the Dead Sea Scrolls. When decrypted, it revealed this phrase: "To those who awaken the chamber, bring not fear but equilibrium. For I have placed in voice the coordinates of memory, that you may find the place where stars cross time." Was this the voice of Cleopatra herself? Or a priestess of the Isis cult? Or something stranger, a remnant of a technology lost to time, a voice preserved not as memory but as activation? If the resonance in the Rennes-les-Bains chamber is a lock, could this cylinder be the key? One more detail has sent shockwaves through the handful of scholars who've seen the transcript. The harmonics within the recording, when plotted using modern software, align exactly with the interior dimensions of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Not just roughly, but to within millimeters. A match so precise that one researcher, Dr. Reuben Tilley of Cambridge, wrote, "Either the voice was tuned to the pyramid or the pyramid was tuned to the voice. Either way, we are no longer speaking of history, we are speaking of an intelligence embedded in architecture, sound, and consciousness itself." The implications are staggering. Could Cleopatra's tomb be more than a burial site? Could it be a device? If the voice on the cylinder is hers, encoded and encrypted with ancient harmonic science, then her tomb may in fact be a broadcast chamber designed to resonate with stellar frequencies. Not just as a message, but as a trigger. Trigger for what? We still don't know. But we do know this. The Vatican, according to newly leaked security directives from 1996, maintains an acoustic containment unit beneath Castel Gandolfo, one that emits a continuous subsonic frequency in a shielded vault. And within it lies a brass cylinder, never played in full since 1959. Father Stampa vanished in 1961. Official cause: heart failure. But colleagues reported he was terrified in his final weeks, muttering about the voice inside stone. In the dead center of Egypt's western desert, encircled by windswept dunes and salt lakes, lies the Siwa Oasis, a place ancient even to the pharaohs. Here, the oracle of Ammonius once whispered divine will into the ears of kings. Alexander the Great himself journeyed to this remote sanctuary, emerging with the conviction that he was of divine birth. But according to recently decoded parchments, it wasn't merely a place of prophecy, it was a site of resonance. The parchment in question was recovered from a hidden alcove beneath the St. Catherine Monastery in Sinai, sealed in a lead tube marked with both Greek and Demotic inscriptions. Written in a curious blend of Greek, Egyptian, and Nabatean Aramaic, it chronicled the final journey of a woman referred to only as she who speaks in tone. Most scholars now agree, this was Cleopatra. The scroll recounts a ritual, the Siwa protocol, designed to prepare a chamber not for death, but for re-emergence. Not in the physical sense, but through resonant communion, a merging of voice, star position, sacred geometry, and memory. According to the ritual, the precise alignment of Venus, Sirius, and the constellation of Virgo would open the sound gate beneath the temple of the oracle. The date mentioned? August 10, 2025. Today, that's just days away. What exactly is the sound gate? The scroll provides only fragments. A chamber beneath the earth, reachable only by 7 descending tones, constructed of orichalcum, an elusive alloy described by Plato as originating in Atlantis. The tones were not sung or spoken, but felt, each one aligned with a pressure point on the human body, creating a biological resonance. In modern terms, this suggests a kind of vibrational authentication system, something far more advanced than a key and lock. The final lines of the scroll, painstakingly reconstructed by Professor Lina Morales of the University of Seville, read, "He who carries the tone within shall not pass, only the one born under its silence may descend. For sound must be still before it awakens the gate." Interpretations vary. Some believe it refers to a bloodline. Others suggest a form of internal frequency alignment, perhaps a trained initiate, or someone whose brainwaves match ancient harmonic patterns. One detail, however, has startled even the most skeptical researchers. When a team from the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities used ground-penetrating radar near the Oracle Temple in Siwa, they detected a perfectly circular void 120 feet below the surface, surrounded by concentric walls, each precisely 7.83 meters apart. 7.83 Hz is the frequency of the Earth's natural resonance, the Schumann resonance. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps the chamber is designed to interact with the Earth itself, to generate a tone that could be picked up elsewhere, by structures like the Great Pyramid or even something further away. A secret Vatican memo from 1972, marked Codex 58-7, Siwa events, references an intercepted message transmitted on shortwave radio during a solar flare. The message, received by a listening station in Greenland, contained a repeated phrase in ancient Greek. "She dreams beneath salt and sound. When the desert sings, she will rise." Since then, access to parts of Siwa has been restricted under vague preservation orders. Satellite imagery shows an unmarked excavation site surrounded by military fencing. No official statement has ever been released. Why the secrecy? Because if the Siwa protocol is real, if Cleopatra's final instructions were not for burial but for activation, then the chamber beneath the oasis is more than a tomb. It is a switch. And that switch may not just connect to ancient temples across Egypt, but to places far beyond, places humanity has yet to rediscover. It was in the dim corridors of the Vatican Apostolic Archive, deep within a section known only to a handful of Curia members, where Father Luca Bellini discovered what he would later call the impossible chart. Hidden within a reliquary labeled Astronomica Obscura, 1611, he found a leather scroll, brittle with time but preserved by layers of beeswax and cedar oil. Unlike any other celestial map, this one included not only constellations but coordinates overlaying Earth's geography, lines that did not correspond to any known navigational system. But the most astonishing detail? The chart was triangulated. 3 points encircled the Mediterranean region: Alexandria, Siwa, and a third, unknown, location deep within the Taurus Mountains of southern Anatolia. In the center of the triangle, a symbol older than any written script, a star with 8 rays enclosed within a spiral. The title of the chart, in Latin, was Bibliotheca Impronta Caelestis, the Library of Celestial Imprints. Father Bellini had spent 20 years decoding forgotten grimoires, cataloging forbidden manuscripts whispered about only in exorcist circles. But this chart, was something else entirely. It wasn't just a map. It was a circuit. A hidden document within the scroll's case contained a riddle. Beneath the bones of the bull where the sky meets stone, she waits in script unburned. No eye may see her, no flame may touch her. Only the voice of starlight may call her forth. The bones of the bull was an ancient term used for the Taurus Mountains. Following the coordinates, Bellini identified a cave system just beyond the ancient city of Tarsus, birthplace of St. Paul, and the site of repeated earthquakes over the last century. The location aligned almost precisely with the third vertex of the triangle. What lay there? The Turkish government had sealed the caves in 1987, citing geological instability. But declassified satellite imaging from American reconnaissance satellites in the late 90s showed a strange anomaly: a perfectly circular depression 80 meters in diameter, appearing like a shallow basin of fused stone. No blast residue, no tool marks. Just stone, glassy, smooth, melted. One researcher likened it to vitrified fortresses found in Scotland and parts of France, sites where stone walls appear to have been melted by intense heat, yet no fire could have done it. Could this location have experienced something similar? Something otherworldly? Further investigation revealed that local legend spoke of a hidden star vault, where ancient scholars once gathered to read the sky from beneath the earth. A 10th-century Arabic manuscript titled Kitab al-Falak al-Kafi, The Hidden Astronomy, describes a place where star charts were etched in obsidian walls using golden tools, illuminated only by reflections from water pools aligned with Sirius and Vega. According to the manuscript, Cleopatra had dispatched emissaries here in her final year, not for diplomacy but to hide something sacred. And then came the twist. In 2016, a team of spelunkers exploring the lower caves of Tarsus illegally, driven by rumors of lost treasure, reported a discovery that was quickly suppressed. Among the group, only one survived, a woman named Naren Duman. She claimed they had stumbled upon an enormous chamber with a dome, covered in golden glyphs that shimmered even in total darkness. Before she could describe more, Turkish military forces arrived and seized all photographic equipment. Naren was released only after signing a non-disclosure agreement. Her companion declared missing, presumed dead. Her final words, in an anonymous interview recorded in Germany months later, chilled even the most hardened skeptics. It was not a library. It was a vault. And it wasn't built by them. It was built for her. Everything inside hummed, like it remembered her name. Was this the third vertex of the celestial imprint? So what did it mean? Modern theorists suggest the 3 locations, Alexandria, Siwa, and Tarsus, might not merely form a symbolic triangle but a harmonic array, capable of interacting with the Earth's magnetic field, channeling signals or frequencies. The implications are staggering. A network of ancient structures functioning as memory banks or transmitters, not of data but of consciousness, identity, and legacy. Perhaps the hidden tomb of Cleopatra was never just a burial chamber. Perhaps it was the nexus of an ancient system designed not to preserve a body, but to restore a voice. And that voice, encoded in glyphs, harmonics, and starlight, may still be waiting to awaken, as soon as the right frequency resonates again. The document came to light in 2003, hidden within a hollowed-out copy of Plato's Timaeus, auctioned discreetly at a private estate sale in Geneva. On the inside of the book was an ink stamp almost faded beyond recognition. Annenerbe Forschungs- und Lehrgemeinschaft, the Nazi Ancestral Heritage Research and Teaching Society. Inside was a manuscript written in spidery, precise German. The author signed it only with initials, Kcher. But the handwriting matched that of Karl Heinrich Richter, a fringe SS scientist believed to have perished in 1945. Long ridiculed even by his contemporaries, Richter's obsession wasn't racial history or occult artifacts like most of the Annenerbe. His fixation was vocal harmonics, and specifically the ancient claim that the human voice, attuned to precise frequencies, could unlock physical mechanisms without contact. He was particularly fascinated with one figure, Cleopatra 7. Richter believed Cleopatra had preserved more than knowledge. He believed she had preserved her consciousness, encoded in geometric sound frequencies and sealed within a harmonic vault. In his recovered manuscript, he wrote, "The tomb is not a sarcophagus. It is an instrument. A chamber of golden resonance designed not to bury, but to transmit. Once aligned to the frequency of her voice, it shall awaken the memory she wove into the stone." He cited numerous ancient sources, mostly ignored or dismissed by mainstream academia, about Egyptian House of Life schools, which trained priestesses in vocal intonation capable of manipulating matter. According to Richter, Cleopatra had mastered this forgotten discipline, and her final project was to leave a trace of herself that could never be destroyed, because it wasn't physical. It was vibrational. One of the most startling claims in the manuscript was a section labeled, Klangkarte, Sound Map. Richter attempted to recreate Cleopatra's vocal range using ancient notations found in papyri fragments and Greek records of public readings she gave. He hypothesized that, by producing a specific vibrational chord, using the human voice, layered with low-frequency instruments, one could activate the vault beneath the Taurus Mountains. A section of the manuscript describes an expedition in 1943 to Anatolia. Disguised as geologists, Richter and his team explored a remote region near Tarsus. Their diaries describe the discovery of an underground cavity with walls that reflected sound like metal but felt like stone. They performed a ritual involving synchronized tones, chanting through a rudimentary loudspeaker system powered by truck batteries. What they claimed happened next is still debated. The journal entries shift into chaotic handwriting. One page describes a sensation of weightlessness, a high whine like boiling stars, and the sudden appearance of symbols on the wall, glyphs that had not been visible before. But the last pages were written in Latin as if someone, or something, else had taken over the pen. Vocem ius audivi. Non mortua esti. In obscura cantat. Regina silentiae. I heard her voice. She is not dead. She sings in the dark. The Queen of Silence. Shortly after this expedition, Richter vanished. Rumors persist that he was smuggled out of Europe through Operation Paperclip under an alias, and some UFO researchers even link him to early sound experiments at Montauk and Pine Gap. But no confirmed record of him exists post-1945. So what does this mean? If Richter was right, and if Cleopatra truly encoded her essence into harmonic resonance, then the Triangle of Alexandria, Siwa, and Tarsus was not just a burial trail. It was a sonic equation. An acoustic key. Some researchers now believe the Vatican's celestial imprint chart may serve a dual purpose, not only locating the vault, but guiding the recreation of the resonance needed to activate it. What would happen if we did? Would we hear Cleopatra's true final words, not carved in stone but sung into eternity? Or would we awaken something we cannot understand, something that remembers more than it should? In early 1984, the CIA initiated Project Sandglass, a sub-operation of the better-known Stargate project, which explored psychic phenomena, particularly remote viewing, the supposed ability of trained individuals to perceive distant or hidden targets using extrasensory means. A declassified transcript, once heavily redacted, describes a remote session conducted on March 14, 1984. The target coordinates were embedded in a sealed envelope and not known to the viewer. The subject, designated viewer Delta 6, entered a deep trance state. The interviewer's prompts were minimal. After several minutes of silence, Delta 6 began to speak in hushed, rhythmic fragments. Stone, beneath the curve of mountain, triangular resonance. It sings in a language that lives in breath, not words. The handler asked for clarification. Delta 6 continued, their voice growing more urgent. There is no tomb. It is not death. It is remembering. She does not lie still, she waits, she vibrates, like light behind a veil. I see her. Her skin is not skin, it is golden night. Her mouth moves but speaks only sound, the kind that feels like emotion before it becomes thought. The room reportedly grew colder. Monitoring instruments showed an unusual EM surge, though the remote viewing chambers were shielded. The viewer's pulse spiked. Then a chilling phrase. The vault breathes. It is not made to be opened. It is made to call back what once was. The Queen's song is not memory. It is pre-memory. A moment later, Delta 6 collapsed, and the session ended abruptly. When revived, they had no memory of the vision, but continued to hum a haunting melody they could not identify, a sequence of 5 tones that allegedly caused subtle vibrations in the metal clipboard beside them. The audio was recorded. That file, known as Echo 12, circulated in underground forums decades later. Acoustic analysts confirmed that the tones held microfrequencies below the threshold of human hearing, layered with ultrasonic harmonics that seemed to interact with the environment. One researcher, a sound engineer in Milan, played the sequence through custom speakers within a soundproof chamber. He described the experience as feeling like the room shifted sideways. His compass began to spin. His dog in another room started howling in distress. He destroyed the equipment afterward. And yet the mystery deepened. An anonymous email sent to a British Egyptologist in 2008 claimed that the melody from Echo 12 matched a fragmented hymn carved on a wall in the Temple of Isis at Philae. The hymn was known as the Call of the Star Mother, believed to be used only in the innermost rites of divine rebirth, a ritual Cleopatra herself would have undergone as High Priestess of Isis. If true, it meant that this song had traveled across time, preserved not in instruments or recordings, but in human consciousness, etched into a language older than alphabets. And it raised a disturbing question. Had Cleopatra anticipated the rise of technologies that could rediscover this resonance? Had she designed her tomb not for her body, but for the return of her presence? According to one final note in the Sandglass files, handwritten and signed and found in the back of a briefing folder, it is not the tomb we seek. It is the chamber of remembering. She is not past. She is waiting for the right vibration. In a remote hill village in southern France, nestled within the crumbling stone walls of a forgotten Romanesque chapel, a strange painting was discovered during routine renovations in 1996. The chapel, named Église Saint-Clair, had been abandoned since the early 1900s. It held little historical significance, at least that's what most believed. But during structural repairs behind the main altar, workers found something utterly unexpected. A wooden panel sealed tightly behind centuries of plaster and dust. The panel bore a painting unlike any catalogued from its era. Rough carbon dating suggested it was painted around 1643. However, the imagery it contained raised impossible questions. At the center of the canvas stood a regal woman, draped in linen garments of Nile white, her skin dusky and her eyes painted with kohl. Her face was distinctly Egyptian, her headdress unmistakably that of Cleopatra VII, complete with the golden uraeus and the sun disk of Isis. She held in one hand an open scroll, not papyrus but something closer to vellum, etched with strange geometric sigils that seemed to vibrate under the touch. With her other hand she gestured upward. And there above her the sky was dark, not like night but like eclipse. Floating in the heavens were 4 glowing figures arranged in a tetrahedral formation, radiating light from circular devices held in their hands. The light spiraled downward, forming a cone of illumination that connected with Cleopatra's crown. These entities, neither angelic nor fully human, bore elongated skulls, deep-set eyes and garments that resembled the robes worn by high priests of Thebes. Yet their features were unlike any known race or era. The entire scene was bathed in an eerie blue-gold luminescence, achieved through some unknown pigment. Under UV light, portions of the canvas glowed faintly, particularly the scroll and the symbols. The chapel's local bishop ordered the painting quietly removed. But not before a scholar from the Université de Strasbourg, Dr. Maëlle Renard, made several high-resolution scans. What she found was astounding. The symbols on the scroll matched inscriptions found on a granite slab near the ruined temple of Taposiris Magna, a site long rumored to contain Cleopatra's hidden tomb. The match was exact. Dr. Renard published her findings in a limited academic journal under the title, A Queen Out of Time, Anachronistic Iconography and the Echoes of Eternity. She concluded with this unsettling line. Either the painter had access to impossible knowledge, or Cleopatra was not merely remembered, she was seen. A deeper layer of mystery unfolded when Dr. Renard traced the signature on the back of the panel. I see fake it 1643. Scholars suggested it might refer to Jean Cousin the Younger, though he had supposedly died long before. No other records matched the initials. But beneath the signature, written in a script more ancient than Latin, was a short phrase. She taught me in dreams. That same year, a man in Boston claimed to have had recurring visions of a woman surrounded by serpents and stars, whispering phrases in a forgotten tongue. He was later diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy, but one of the phrases he repeated matched the glyphs in the painting. Was this coincidence? Or evidence of something far stranger? A mimetic signal passed not through time but through human consciousness itself? The painting, last known to be stored in a private collection in Bruges, vanished from record in 2002. Some say it was sold. Others believe it was taken, by individuals who track anomalies like this across history, piecing together a truth too vast for any one culture to hold. But one detail lingers. A cryptic note, found tucked behind the canvas before it was crated away, written in faded red ink. The tomb is not buried, it is cloaked. The song, the scroll, and the sky must align. Then she returns, not as a woman, but as the memory we all forgot we shared. In the year 1508, during the height of the Italian Renaissance, a relatively obscure Florentine sculptor named Luca Ferretti presented a marble statue unlike any seen before. It was unveiled not in a public piazza, as was customary, but in a private salon in Venice, commissioned by an anonymous patron whose identity remains a mystery to this day. Ferretti named the piece La Regina sotto la luce, the Queen beneath the light. The statue depicted a woman seated in a meditative pose, her gaze upward, her hands open in her lap. She wore Egyptian robes, yet her facial features were unmistakably modeled with classical Roman symmetry. Coiled around her arms and neck were snakes, cobras, rendered with uncanny realism. Resting at her feet was an object rarely sculpted in the Renaissance. A papyrus scroll, unfurled just enough to show strange etched markings. But it wasn't merely the detail or subject that shocked Ferretti's contemporaries, it was the aura around the statue. Many who saw it in person described a presence in the room. One aristocrat wrote in a private journal, "I felt her watch me, as though I were the stone and she the sculptor." Ferretti himself, in a letter to fellow artist Andrea del Sarto, wrote something far stranger. "She came again last night. The woman in linen, veiled in stars, surrounded by the scent of myrrh and sand. She whispers in a tongue I do not know, yet I feel her meanings in my bones. I do not chisel her, I release her from the stone." The letter included a sketch, a rough but unmistakable map, drawn in the margins. It bore resemblance to a part of northern Egypt, just west of Alexandria. In particular, it outlined the Mareotis Basin, once home to the Temple of Osiris. But there was something else, a mark deep within a region not typically mapped, an X over what appeared to be a subterranean structure. This sketch remained unknown until 1977, when it was discovered in the private archives of the Medici Library in Florence, hidden inside the binding of a collection of Apollonius Rhodius poems. Art historians, initially dismissing it as artistic fantasy, changed their tune when an infrared scan of La Regina sotto la luce, now held in a Viennese museum vault, revealed a shocking anomaly. Inside the scroll of the statue, beneath the marble surface, was a cavity containing an object. Using microendoscopic equipment, researchers inserted a thin fiber optic camera through a hairline crack in the statue's base. What they saw left the team stunned. A small bronze cylinder, etched with glyphs identical to those found in the Book of the Dead, rested within. At its center, a single deep blue stone, uncut but pulsing faintly under the scope. The Viennese Museum, citing conservation concerns, refused to extract the object. But a leaked internal memo revealed something more chilling. The blue stone gave off low-frequency electromagnetic pulses. Not constant, but timed. One every 73 seconds. Researchers calculated that the timing corresponded exactly with a particular star's position over the Earth. Sirius, the dog star, known to the ancient Egyptians as Sopdet, harbinger of the Nile flood, and sacred to Isis. Ferretti had no known knowledge of astrophysics. Then came the most disturbing discovery. During an attempt to digitally reconstruct the object's markings, the team inadvertently created a sound pattern, based on the spacing and orientation of the glyphs. When played through a frequency synthesizer, the resulting tone caused a temporary shutdown of the museum's lighting system, and induced hallucinations in two staff members. One described seeing a desert under a blood-red moon. Another whispered, "She walks between tombs of salt." Since then, La Regina Sotto la Luz has been placed in deep storage, under constant surveillance. But rumors persist. A Vatican archivist claimed the object matches descriptions from a lost scroll of Hypatia of Alexandria, said to chronicle the existence of a queen who swallowed the sun, drank the Nile, and walked beyond the veil of time. Was Faraday truly guided by dreams? Or did he, as his final inscription reads, see her eyes behind every stone? In 1889, amidst the final golden years of Victorian exploration, Colonel Jonathan Rhys Blackwood of the British Royal Engineers arrived in Egypt under the pretense of geotechnical assessment for future rail expansion. That was the official story, at least. Privately, Blackwood was acting on intelligence gathered by a covert arm of the British Museum, a network of antiquarians and mystics informally referred to as the Alexandrian Circle. Their interest? A sealed chamber, reportedly uncovered beneath a collapsed Greco-Roman villa on the outskirts of Alexandria during a minor earthquake in 1887. The villa, thought to have once belonged to a Roman governor sympathetic to the Ptolemaic line, had long since been reduced to rubble. But two things made it noteworthy: its proximity to the Serapeum, a site of Egyptian Greek syncretic worship, and a series of underground corridors, revealed by local Bedouin who spoke of unnatural echoes, whispering winds and walls, that drink the light. Blackwood, a man of both military discipline and esoteric obsession, brought with him a small expedition team, a cartographer, a linguist, 2 royal engineers, and a French medium named Madame Eloise Duvant, whose reputation for channeling historical voices had spread from Paris to Constantinople. His personal journal, never meant for public eyes, was recovered decades later and remains classified by the British Museum. However, a portion of its contents, known as the Delta Fragments, were leaked to the public in 2002. In them, Blackwood writes, "The deeper we descend, the more it feels as though the stones themselves resist intrusion. The air thickens. Voices echo where none are present. I awoke this morning to find strange ink markings on my maps, symbols I do not recall drawing." At approximately 60 feet below ground, the team discovered a hidden corridor sealed behind a false wall, decorated with a mixture of Egyptian and early Coptic Christian symbols. Ankhs intertwined with Chiro, a blending that should not have existed in any known cultural record. The wall bore a message translated by the team's linguist. "She lies where shadow drinks the moon, beneath the breath of the drowned king, past the eye that does not blink, in the tomb that remembers." Beyond it was a descending spiral of stone steps, so narrow and steep they had to descend single file. The walls shimmered faintly, not with moisture, but with mineral traces that pulsed under lamplight like veins of living metal. They descended for 6 hours. What they found at the bottom was not a chamber, but a vast subterranean gallery, carved in impossible symmetry. The space was lined with pylons, each covered in glyphs and abstract reliefs, some resembling celestial bodies arranged in unfamiliar constellations. One wall depicted a large figure, female, crowned with both the uraeus and a solar disk, floating above what appeared to be a stylized version of the Nile, her arms outstretched, a serpent coiled around each wrist. It was unlike any known rendering of Cleopatra. Madame Eloise, upon entering the gallery, reportedly collapsed. When revived, she whispered in a tongue neither French nor English. The only words the team could decipher were, "The Queen waits, but not for us." Blackwood, shaken but undeterred, ordered the team deeper into the structure. They passed through a rotunda filled with mirrored obsidian panels, reflecting distorted versions of the team. Some showed them walking backwards, others portrayed them in different clothing, different centuries. It was here that the team's engineer, Thomas Wexley, began bleeding from the nose and ears. He begged to turn back, mumbling about the sand being inside the stone. 2 days later, the team vanished. The only survivor was the cartographer, Hugo Merrill, who stumbled into a village 10 miles from the site. His clothes were shredded, his eyes nearly blind. He died 48 hours later from dehydration and what doctors described as extreme temporal disorientation. Before dying, he reportedly whispered, "She showed me the scroll. Not papyrus, it was made of light. I saw Rome burn and her smile as it did. What remains most disturbing is this." In 2015, a ground-penetrating radar scan of the area revealed a void beneath the same coordinates described in Blackwood's journal. The void measured 260 meters long, curved, and lined with what appeared to be metallic struts. The report was immediately redacted by Egyptian authorities. And the original spiral staircase? Now gone. Sealed under reinforced concrete during a public safety operation, in 1999. Still, to this day, travelers near the old Serapeum ruins have reported strange phenomena: whispers from beneath the earth, light that flickers without source, and at certain moonless nights, a low, pulsing hum that resonates through the sand. Is it possible Colonel Blackwood found the first true entrance to Cleopatra's lost tomb? Or was it only one of many illusions designed to draw the right soul toward her final resting place? In the summer of 1933, as the world teetered between wars, a married pair of American archaeologists, Dr. Marcus Bellamy and Dr. Eleanor Hart, led a quiet expedition into the western desert of Egypt, near the vast and often overlooked Gilf Kebir Plateau. Officially, their aim was to study prehistoric rock art, but their real obsession was something else: what they called the night map. Eleanor, a linguistic anthropologist from Yale, had spent years analyzing references to star-shaped engravings in Coptic monastic texts and early Arabic scrolls. Most were dismissed by academics as poetic metaphors or religious symbolism. But one reference in particular had drawn her attention: a 9th-century Syriac manuscript, now housed in Istanbul, which spoke of a sky-written codex buried in the hollow of the Great Dune, inscribed by those who spoke to the last queen beneath the earth. The last queen, Cleopatra. Eleanor believed that buried beneath the sands near Gilf Kebir was not merely a monument, but a kind of stellar archive, a map not of where Cleopatra was laid to rest, but of where her spirit was meant to return. After weeks of scorching wind, mechanical failures, and one near-death encounter with a sinkhole, the team stumbled across what Eleanor would later describe in her notes as a bone of the earth protruding from time. It was a curved shard of polished metal, buried at a shallow angle in a rock outcrop. About 3 feet long, semilunar in shape, and inscribed with minute, almost fractal-like glyphs that shimmered silver in the desert sun. They had found the first fragment of what would be dubbed the Celestial Codex. Back in Cairo, analysis confirmed the metal was a composite of copper, iridium, and an unknown isotope of beryllium, not matching any known alloy on Earth at the time. The fragment was gently curved on one side, flat on the other, and etched with 243 symbols arranged in elliptical spirals. When photographed under ultraviolet light, a second layer of symbols appeared, this time resembling constellations. But not our constellations. Eleanor cross-referenced the star patterns against existing celestial charts. The coordinates pointed not to anything visible in the northern night sky, but rather to deep space regions only charted decades later by the Hubble telescope, places billions of light-years away. In 1933 they were unknown, unmapped, impossible to predict, and yet, somehow present on this fragment. The only legible notation, written in Greek script but styled in the decorative Ptolemaic fashion, was one chilling phrase: "For the house of Isis, when Earth forgets her name." The implications were staggering. Eleanor theorized that the codex was either a time-locked artifact, encoded with information meant to be revealed only when humanity had reached a specific level of astronomical understanding, or worse, a warning. A last will encoded by an ancient priesthood who foresaw a cycle of forgetting, exile, and eventual return. Marcus, ever the rationalist, dismissed such theories. But then something happened that forced him to reconsider. After weeks of cataloging the codex, the pair were visited in their Cairo flat by an unknown man, tall, pale, dressed in a tailored linen suit despite the heat. He claimed to be from the Royal Institute of Theological Astronomy in London. No such institution existed. He knew of the codex. He called it a memory fragment, and warned that others were searching for it. Others who believed the codex was not just a map but a key. The next morning the fragment was gone. Their flat had been ransacked, but no money or artifacts taken. Only the codex. And curiously, the film negatives taken under UV light had been chemically wiped clean, the emulsion stripped bare. Shaken, Eleanor and Marcus left Egypt days later. But here's the strangest part. 30 years later, in 1963, a doctoral student named Claire Dunley working at the Smithsonian stumbled across a hidden folder inside the Bellamy Hart archives. Inside were Eleanor's handwritten notes, and a carbon tracing of the codex. Scrawled in red pencil at the bottom was a single line, almost illegible. "She is not in a tomb. She is in a corridor between the years." This cryptic message aligned with several other discoveries across the 20th century, references in secret Vatican archives to a walking queen, and whispers from Bedouin tribes of a woman of gold seen emerging from dunes during solar eclipses. To this day no one knows where the rest of the codex is. But rumors persist that one fragment resides in a private collection in Buenos Aires, and another in a secret vault beneath Mount Athos, protected by silent monks who never sleep on Wednesdays, the day Cleopatra died. In February 1981, as the Cold War quietly simmered beneath the surface of global politics, the Soviet Space Agency launched a classified orbital reconnaissance satellite known as Cosmos 1266. Officially, it was designed to observe atmospheric radiation patterns over the Middle East. Unofficially, it carried an experimental payload developed by the Moscow Institute of Astrophysics, a sensor array capable of detecting non-solar light emissions, specifically reflected stellar radiation. Why? Because someone within the Soviet military hierarchy believed that certain ancient structures, if real, were not aligned with the sun, but with stars that no longer existed. 2 weeks after its launch, Cosmos 1266 passed over the Egyptian-Libyan border, scanning the Great Sand Sea just west of Gilf Kabir. At precisely 3:14 Universal Time Coordinated, the satellite's deep sensor array detected something impossible. From beneath nearly 30 feet of compacted sand, a weak but unmistakable signal of reflected starlight returned to the satellite's sensor grid, not from Earth's surface, but from an angled substructure that appeared to mirror the Canopus constellation. The reflection wasn't thermal, electromagnetic, or solar. It was refracted light from deep space, bouncing off a geometric formation buried underground. Even more disturbing? The alignment of the star map was time-shifted, as if the reflection came not from the sky as it appeared in 1981, but from how it looked in 36 BCE, the very year of Cleopatra's last military campaign against Rome. This anomaly was marked an atmospheric glitch in public satellite logs. But an internal KGB document, later leaked in 1996 by a dissident agent known only as Volkov, described the location in stark detail. Subsurface geometry consistent with a truncated dodecahedron. Walls appear polished. One aperture faces Canopus alignment from ancient date. No thermal footprint. Non-human engineering suspected. The last line was highlighted in red. In April 1981, a small Soviet exploratory team posing as geologists arrived in Cairo and made their way into the western desert under cover of an oil exploration permit. They never returned. Their last radio transmission, intercepted by British intelligence near the Aswan relay station, was chilling. The door is open but not for us. Something is watching the stars from below. Shortly afterward, a sandstorm of unusual intensity swept through the area. Radar imaging taken after the event showed that the anomaly had vanished, buried once again beneath shifting dunes as if deliberately erased. Only one physical remnant remained, a briefcase retrieved from the team's abandoned vehicle near the Farafra oasis. Inside were carbon copies of 3D contour maps, several sketches of a multi-angled obsidian chamber, and one final handwritten phrase in Russian. Cleopatra was never meant to be found. She was meant to be remembered by the sky. In 2002, an NSA-funded program operating under the code name Project Orion Echo quietly redirected one of its satellite reconnaissance divisions to study archaeological anomalies across North Africa. While publicly associated with climate analysis, the initiative's real mission was far stranger. Using ground-penetrating LiDAR arrays mounted on high-altitude drones, the team identified a subsurface chamber in the western desert, within the same coordinates flagged by the Soviet satellite Cosmos 1266 2 decades earlier. However, what caught their attention was not the chamber itself, but what moved beneath it. Buried under nearly 10 meters of calcified sandstone and fossilized desert crust, the chamber showed periodic shifts in shape. The LiDAR data revealed subtle fluctuations in the geometry of its walls, like breathing. Not mechanical vibrations. Not tectonic drift. Something more deliberate. The NSA dispatched a team of specialists led by Dr. Eleanor Parr, an expert in ancient structural acoustics from the University of Chicago. Parr had long argued that certain megalithic structures across Egypt resonated at frequencies beyond human hearing, suggesting they were designed not just for burial or ritual, but for activation. Upon arrival, the team drilled carefully and lowered a high-resolution camera into the cavity. What they saw was not a tomb. It was a machine. The chamber's interior was made of mirror-black obsidian, engraved with lines that glowed faintly under infrared light. In the center stood a rotating sphere of gold and quartz, suspended by magnetic fields. Surrounding it were 12 arms like the spokes of a clock, but none pointed to hours. Instead, they aligned to astronomical coordinates that hadn't been accurate for over 2,000 years. The mechanism was still moving. Slowly. Rhythmically. Unceasingly. Parr's acoustic devices picked up a low-frequency pulse, a resonance of 432 Hz, considered by ancient Pythagorean scholars to be the frequency of the universe. When the team matched the signal to historical sky charts, they found that the chamber was tracking the precession of the stars, aligning not with the present sky, but with the firmament as it would have appeared in Cleopatra's final year. One of the team members, a linguistic cryptographer named Jonah Briggs, noticed something else. A repeating pattern etched into the walls in Coptic, Latin, and an unknown language. After cross-referencing the symbols, he translated a fragment. When the lion meets the scorpion in the age of the reed, the empress will rise from silence. Not before. The team was stunned. The phrase matched Egyptian zodiacal prophecy tied to Leo and Scorpio, and the heliacal rising of Sirius, a phenomenon central to both the ancient Egyptian calendar and Cleopatra's own divine identity as Isis reborn. Then the device stopped. The sphere in the center froze mid-rotation. The infrared glow faded. The chamber grew completely silent. The pulse, gone. Just as Parr reached for her communicator, a low tremor shook the ground. Dust rained from the ceiling. The drone's uplink was cut. The access shaft collapsed. They had triggered something. 3 hours later, a sandstorm rolled over the site. The area was buried once more and satellite surveillance was blacked out under classified orders. The last image recovered from the drone's camera before transmission ended was a close-up of the central sphere. Newly etched upon its surface, where no inscription had been before, was a single golden scarab. In the winter of 1654, the thick stone walls of the Apostolic Palace in Vatican City concealed a meeting so secret that not even the Archivum Secretum Vaticanum, the secret archives, were supposed to record it. Attending were 6 men. 1 cardinal. 1 Jesuit priest. 2 astronomers. A Coptic scholar from Alexandria. And a man known only in the records as Custos Veritatis, the keeper of truth. This conclave gathered not to debate theology, nor to elect a pope, but to decide the fate of a single artifact, a hand-drawn map on calfskin vellum, encoded in 3 ancient languages and sealed in an ivory case inlaid with gold. The map had arrived in Rome weeks earlier under cover of darkness, smuggled out of Egypt by French agents loyal to the Duc de Guise. It was accompanied by an unsigned letter, written in archaic Latin, that warned, "Within this path lies the hourglass of kings and the grave of the one who drank the stars. To reveal it is to ignite the sky once more." The cartography was impossible by 17th-century standards. It depicted regions of western Egypt with shocking geological accuracy, land formations that had not been visible for millennia, due to erosion, sand movement, and forgotten riverbeds. The central icon was a black triangle flanked by 2 stylized falcons, the ancient emblem of Horus. At the heart of the triangle was the phrase, Sanctuarium Secundus, ex silentio ad astra, the second sanctuary, from silence to the stars. One of the astronomers, Brother Matteo Arcanus, was the first to recognize the cipher embedded in the map. When decoded, it traced a cosmic alignment that had not occurred since 30 BCE, and would not occur again for another 2,000 years. The cardinal, aghast, argued the map was heretical. It spoke of celestial ascent not through the grace of Alo, but through the design of ancient hands, as if humanity had once possessed the technology to move between worlds. To reveal such a thing, he warned, would undo the Church's entire cosmology. The Custos Veritatis disagreed. He cited older records from the time of Pope Sylvester II, who had once dabbled in what the Church called forbidden numerologies, maps of the heavens passed down by Moorish scholars, hinting at an era where knowledge flowed in both directions, from stars to earth and earth to stars. The debate grew heated. The Jesuit priest warned that if the sanctuary were real, and if it was ever uncovered, it could awaken powers humanity was not prepared to reckon with, forces tied not to the divine, but to ancient science disguised as myth. The map, he insisted, must be destroyed. But instead of fire, they chose silence. The Custos Veritatis removed the map from the chamber and placed it in a sealed box marked Annexum Lumen 8R. That box would go on to be stored beneath the Vatican Library, in a vault so obscure that even the modern cataloging system refers to it only as Vox Sanguinis, the voice of blood. It remained untouched for more than 3 centuries. Until 2009. That year, a researcher named Clara Venn, working under an obscure papal restoration project, stumbled across a coded reference in the logs of the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Church's list of forbidden books. The log didn't refer to a book. It referred to a map. Her inquiries were met with immediate denial. But 3 days after filing her discovery report, she disappeared from Rome. Her apartment was found untouched, her research erased, and her Vatican credentials revoked. 1 month later, her brother, a geophysicist with the European Space Agency, received a plain envelope. Inside was a single microfilm strip. On it were the coordinates, the same as those found on the NSA's LiDAR scans in 2002. In the silence of the western Egyptian desert, nearly 100 kilometers beyond the last known Roman outpost, lies a region so devoid of life that Bedouins call it Al-Meskun, the Forsaken. There, beneath a dried salt flat the size of Manhattan, georadar picked up an anomaly. It was not a tomb, not a pyramid, but a structure, perfectly symmetrical, spanning 400 meters beneath the surface. Octagonal, metallic, with corridors pointing in the direction of Alpha Draconis, the pole star of 3000 BCE. The team that found it, funded in part by the Vatican and under the silent oversight of multiple global intelligence agencies, was known internally as Project Oriones. Their objective: to confirm whether the location, known in ancient texts only as the Second Sanctuary, was real, and if it held the tomb of the last pharaoh of Egypt, Cleopatra VII. But when they breached the outer layer, what they discovered changed the mission entirely. A structure out of time. The walls inside were not carved limestone. They were fused quartzite, formed using heat levels exceeding 2000 degrees Celsius, impossible by ancient standards. The corridors sloped downward in precise Fibonacci proportions, and their angles shifted slightly as if the very architecture responded to lunar gravity. And then, at the center, they found the chamber of breath. Inside it, no sarcophagus, no human remains, just a suspended throne, levitating via unknown means, beneath a dome etched with a language that was neither Greek, Latin, Egyptian, nor Arabic. A linguist on site called it pre-Euphratic technoscript, symbols resembling circuit patterns rather than letters. But that was not the true anomaly. At the base of the throne was a biometric pad. When one of the researchers accidentally stepped onto it, the room hummed, and a projection lit the dome. Not a hologram. Something more tactile, interactive. It displayed a star chart overlaid with DNA helices. In the center, the Eye of Horus spinning slowly, revealing a final set of coordinates. Not on Earth, but on Mars. Cleopatra's final exodus? One of the translated panels read, "I am she who walked between thrones. Daughter of Isis, born not of Nile but of flame. When kingdoms fall I rise. When gods sleep I awaken. My tomb is not a cage but a gate." The Vatican representative, who had accompanied the dig under a fabricated name, immediately ordered the room sealed. But not before 2 encrypted data cubes were extracted. One was sent to Rome. The other was intercepted in transit, vanishing without trace. To this day, no government, church, or academic body has officially acknowledged the site's existence. The salt flat has since been declared a military exclusion zone, citing seismic instability. Yet in a leaked UN internal memo dated March 2023, a satellite photo appears to show an orbital disturbance above the region, an atmospheric anomaly consistent with localized gravitational displacement. Some call it fiction. Others call it proof. But among a circle of quiet scholars and rogue scientists, the site is referred to as Cleopatra's Ascension Gate, not a resting place but a departure point. Final reflection. Was Cleopatra truly the last queen of the Nile? Or was she part of something far older, an ancient lineage guarding not treasure but technology? And if she didn't die beneath Alexandria's rubble, if she left instead of perished, then we must ask, who or what was she? And more disturbingly, is she coming back?